Okay, thank you. Well, thank you to everybody coming along to this OCP panel discussion. On the panel, we have Marc from Rittal, who hopefully you can see on the screen now. We have Joris from maincubes, and we have Menno from Circle B. Now, we're on this call for 45 minutes. We'll try and get over our piece, our questions, in the first 30 minutes and leave 15 minutes for questions from the audience. So I'd like you to start any questions that you might want answered about OCP or decarbonisation and dematerialisation and circular economy and all sorts of other things we're going to touch on. Start pumping them into the chat box now, because what they have to do, they have to transfer from the Grip app into the Zoom app for us so we can see them. So start pumping your questions in now. So let me kind of set the scene for a few minutes. Hopefully quite a few people have heard of the Open Compute Project Foundation and when it started back in 2011. And it started with the hyperscalers looking for really commoditizing all the server hardware. They weren't happy with the traditional vendor lock-in that they got from Dell, etc., and HP. So basically, they went and they designed their own servers with the manufacturers over in the Far East. And now it accounts for a huge amount of business globally. You may not have seen OCP servers, but luckily, we do have OCP servers now on show in Amsterdam in the maincubes data center at this OCP Experience Center. So we're going to talk about all this gear. If you ever want to go and see it after lockdown, then it's on your doorstep in Amsterdam. So let's quickly have a look at what's behind all this open source. Now, open source is about developing a collaborative commons in open source technology. It's about open collaboration to make things better, faster. And if you look at all the best products that are available today, they're in the hyperscalers. When I look at the enterprise data centers, they really look kind of Stone Age compared to what the hyperscalers are doing in terms of server technology, storage, network, and all the other things associated with a data center. Now, there's lots and lots of videos on the OCP website. You can go and have a look. But just to try and put this into scale, how big this is, even though you may never have seen these servers. At the Consumer Electronics Show, which is on at the moment in California, you can go into that show and Microsoft, who are one of the members of OCP and use OCP servers, have just uploaded a video. And it's quite an interesting video. It's a video of just one of their data centers. This data center has 20 buildings. Each building can take 2 big airline jets. There are 500,000 OCP servers at this data center. Now, that's just one data center. Now, if you go to the OCP website and look at the membership database, you'll see Facebook on there, you'll see Microsoft, you'll see Google, you'll see Tencent, you'll see Alibaba, you'll see all the big players except Amazon that tend to go it alone. And they take information from the open source communities, but they never seem to contribute anything back. But the scale of it is huge. And just another example, Tencent, one of our members, is currently building a data center with a capacity for 1 million servers, 1 million in one data center. So this is huge business. It includes all sorts of things, not just servers, it's the storage, it's the data center designs, it's how you optimize them for energy and decarbonisation. And it also includes a huge circular economy business. Now, what's interesting about the circular economy is as we move towards decarbonised electricity, 100% of the emissions associated with a data center in the future will be what we call the embodied carbon, i.e. Scope 3 it's called. Now, what's interesting about this, the way you reduce that is you reduce that embodied carbon by keep using equipment for as long as possible. So I'll give you an example. If you were buying brand new server equipment and installing it in a data center, compared to using repurposed OCP gear coming out of the hyperscalers, you can potentially reduce your scope 3 embodied carbon emissions by about 80%. Now, it's really quite substantial. And we still got people kind of looking at the PUE and the energy efficiency of the data center, but the scope 2 emissions due to electricity and that energy efficiency side, when you start looking at PUE, is trivial. It's less than 20% when you start getting into green electricity. We should start to look at the 80% of the emissions, which are the embodied emissions in the data center building and all the hardware. So that's just one thing. Now, another thing that you get in open source communities, they're driven by the consumers. We call them professional consumers, the Facebooks, the Googles that consume at scale. And they have a different motivation to a vendor of hardware. Their motivation is not to produce and sell stuff. What they're trying to do is squeeze as much out of stuff and minimize stuff. So what you tend to see in open source communities that are driven by these big prosumers, you tend to see a big focus on reducing hardware. And there are plenty of examples. We call it dematerialization. And the telcos are now adopting this equipment, and they are now dematerializing their data centers and their telephone exchanges where they're installing this open source tech by about 90%. Now, if you want to see any of these videos, if you just Google me on the internet or go to YouTube, I've done lots of presentations about dematerialization. Now, when you dematerialize the hardware by up to 90%, it has a massive impact on decarbonising the data centre, because once you take away the stuff, you dematerialise on the scope 3, the embodied carbon. So this is really quite a big thing. Now, what's interesting, all this kind of fits very nicely into something that's happening big time in Europe. You may all have heard of the EU Green Deal. Now, there's something in the EU Green Deal which is going to impact the data center industry, but very few people seem to be aware of this. Now, there's a new tax coming in this year, and it's called the EU Carbon Border Tax. Now, the way this is going to work, as products come in from outside of the European Union, across the border, their embodied carbon will be measured, and depending on how much embodied carbon there is in that product, it will be taxed. It will have a tariff raised on it. Now, this is about trying to reduce carbon emissions, but there's a secondary kind of motivation that the European Union have on this. And what it is, it's about if we can add carbon taxes to products coming in from the dirtier industries in India and China, we can start to make European manufacturing more competitive. So there's another side to it. Now, this tax is coming in this year. So if you don't know about it, go and find out about it. So these are some of the things. And just to kill one myth, if I can, the lowest carbon footprint data center is financially the lowest cost. You'll hear people all the time talking about it costs more to have a decarbonised data centre. It doesn't. It saves money, but you just need to look at it differently and break those old mindsets. So that's my little bit. That kind of sets the scene on the environmental. Now, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go over to Marc, and I'm just going to say to Marc, I'm going to ask him a few questions. And what I would like Marc to do, I would like Marc to give us a very brief introduction to Rittal and their background with OCP. You know, when did they start with OCP? When did they start the collaboration? Who are they working with? You know, how many racks, OCP racks, are Rittal shifting every month? How many racks do Microsoft have, for example? That one data center that I mentioned, that video earlier, If you've got 500,000 servers, how many racks are there in that one data center? It's considerable. So Marc, over to you. Tell us a little bit about the background, Rittal and OCP.
Thanks, John. A lot of questions in one question. Welcome all. Yeah, Rittal and OCP, going back for over 5 years now. I'm involved about 3 years now from the Rittal side. I'm part of the core Rittal team for data centers. So with my colleagues in the world, I deliver racks to the data centers across the FLAP, but also across the world. Yeah, and we have a deep collaboration with the hyperscalers for some years already. The hyperscalers John was mentioning, Facebook and Microsoft, of course. Yeah, and that's a collaboration between all the parties, and yeah, I see it like Formula One. So you invest and you join and you innovate and you adapt it. So then you contribute to a green environment also, but you contribute to the world. Yeah, and the amount of racks, John, you mentioned it. It was 500,000 servers only there, but you have to imagine we ship around more than 1,000 racks every month towards these customers for years already. So the CBRE was telling last year was a good year for hyperscalers. We saw it already in Rittal also. It was a record year for us also in Rittal with the racks. Yeah. So that's the collaboration with Rittal and OCP, and in the Netherlands we have also the Experience Center, of course, you mentioned. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Now, one other question, Marc, which is this new disruptive, I call it a revolutionary rack, the OCP V3 rack. Can you give us a bit of a background on this? Because Rittal were very, very key to the development of this rack with the hyperscalers like Facebook. Can you kind of give us a little bit of a story behind this V3 rack, which to me is uniquely different from all racks that have gone before?
Yep. Yeah, it's we are now living in the world of the V2, of course. Yeah, the V3 is the new rack for the OCP. We're still working on that one, of course. Rittal is as a project leader inside the OCP team, of course, who is pulling that car to do it. Yeah, the new V3 has the bus bar from 12 volts to 48 volts, of course, to support the bigger load of the rack, up to 30 kilowatts. Yeah, the other thing what is new is cooling, hybrid cooling. You see the tipping point of cooling by air is coming. So we need to look at new cooling solutions, and that's also the thing that is happening now. Is we're working together with the company Zudacor. We bought it last year to innovate on chip cooling. Again, we did it in 2007 already with water, but we were too early, I think. But now we're back at that point and trying to make a hybrid an hybrid solution to fulfill these requirements who are lying ahead. So yeah, there are a lot of things happening on the V3. It's also ready for the new families in the OCP community. It enables servers up to 700 watts processors. So yeah, it's a new phase, I think, in this rack. With main topic is cooling. Yeah, for the future.
Okay, thanks. Cheers. I'd recommend people go and have a look at this rack. There's plenty of videos about the development of it from the Rittal guys working with Facebook, etc. So it's a very interesting rack, this hybrid cooling liquid and air. And we're looking at heat dissipation from a rack now, more than 30 kilowatts, and processors at 700 kilowatt processors from these new accelerator servers to go up to 5.6 kilowatts. So it's big stuff. Now, over to Joris. I'm going to ask Joris. I was going to ask Joris a question about the carbon neutral status of maincubes based on this standard, which is a German standard. And Joris recommended I wouldn't mention that because most people would never have heard of it on listening in on this except the Germans. The Germans tend to have their own standards that don't always creep outside of Germany. So what I'm going to ask Joris about this first question is, tell us about the OCP Ready Colo solution provider status that you obtained just recently, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, John, and thank you very much, Mark, as well. Before answering that question, John, and to the audience, because you now, just throw in another question about this certificate in Germany, let me try to answer and explain. So, although this certificate, which is like they call it ERCO certificate in Germany, the reason for not really mentioning it today in too much detail is, as you mentioned, possible confusion in the Dutch market. But what is important to emphasize on is that the whole way of working within maincubes is around themes of decarbonization, creating a better world, be efficient. So having said that, OCP obviously becomes an important topic, as well as the OCP Ready Data Center. So let me try to talk the audience a little bit through the journey that we've been doing so far regarding OCP. So for about 2 years ago, we met with Circle B, Rittal, and the OCP community, because at that point in time, they were looking for a new, let's call it clubhouse, for their OCP Experience Center in Amsterdam. So at that time, we were kind of, relatively new to the Dutch market, and we were trying to differentiate ourselves from others, and at the same point in time, try to create a future-proof and sustainable setup. So I think coincidence does exist. When we were making the strategy, coincidentally, we met with Circle B and Rittal, and that's when it all started. So we are a strong believer in, creating this better environment. Do as much as possible. Go the extra mile. And that's when we decided to, become the host of this experience center. Whilst having done that, we got more engaged with the foundation as well. So we were educated on all the possibilities that are available. And maybe for the audience and for the people that don't know, we operate a legacy data center in Amsterdam. So we completely refurbished, modernized, and now also adapted it to the criteria or requirements of OCP. Now, with the great help of the OCP Foundation and our fellow OCP Experience members, about 2 months ago, we officially were granted the OCP Ready Facility. And I'm not going to bother you with a zillion details of all the things that we've been doing. But what I think that is the most important thing to understand and remember, that even with a traditional data center, you have the great opportunity to become the host and deploy OCP equipment. And as explained by John, gives you access to, a number of more and more important things that you can achieve. So we are proud that we took the decision to do it. We are a strong believer in the whole philosophy, and we believe that every contribution that can be done from our perspective needs to be done. And to summarize, I believe getting the official OCP Ready Data Center status is the confirmation that we made the right decision, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you very much. Now, you've answered my other two questions in a way that I was going to ask you, because but let me just touch on one thing. On your website, you have this wonderful document which can be downloaded. It's the 6 steps to OCP. It's a checklist. And what I like about it is the way it kind of kills that myth of it's not more expensive to decarbonize, to move towards sustainability. Can you kind of, as you've got some really good guides on your website, can you kind of just give people a bit more information about this, killing this myth, this idea? The way you've built your data center, for example, from a refurbished data center is a much lower cost. It has a much lower carbon footprint. Can you kind of tell people about this?
Yeah, this is a very interesting thing, John. And you obviously are in this OCP world every single minute of the day. We all have to realize that at this point in time, still a lot of people are or have not been engaged with OCP. So I came to the conclusion a while ago that a couple of things that we really had to do in close collaboration is educate the market. Now, the foundation does it in a brilliant way, and so do you. But we as a data center company then obviously also should try to explain, educate, try to make it tangible, which we did with the Experience Center, but I'm sure we'll get to that point later. But to my surprise, I had to explain to the market that OCP is not something from outer space. It's not similar to like an unidentified flying object. It's IT, and it's a proven concept. As you mentioned, it's been used by the hyperscalers for years and years, and Rittal has been shipping tons of racks for years and years. And still the market says, OCP? What is OCP? So back to the website. Yeah, so what we try to do is, within a number of steps and questions, make people aware that it is something that is just another version and a very much more sophisticated and efficient version of IT. I think Menno will be the more appropriate person to dive into the technical details, because end of the day, what Circle B as a partner is doing is gluing all the IDs and hardware within a data center together to a solution that simply provides what the customer requires at a much lower carbon footprint. So, yeah, I can only emphasize people to, have a look on the website, go through the questions. If you have the ability, and as John was saying, after the COVID lockdown will hopefully finally end in spring, reach out to any of us and please take the time and make a visit to the Experience Center. It will make it tangible. You can see it. I mean, Marc is around, Menno is around, you can do remote tests. And I think that's end of the day. People should be educated. The myth should be cleared or explained, and then people should simply start trying and testing. And yeah, I think the proof is in the pudding. And I strongly believe that this is just the beginning. And in hopefully 5, but maybe 10 years' time, OCP is well adopted and the same standard as having an iPad on your desk.
Okay. Thank you very much. I like it. The trouble with people within the community, like I'm going to ask Menno some questions now, and I'm a bit of a tech head, and Menno is a bigger tech head than I am, and we tend to lose people. So we need people like Joris who can, and I'm not saying that you're not technical, Joris, I'm not saying that at all, but you have a way of expressing things more simply where you don't lose people, and that's why I like that 6 point. Now, over to Menno. Now, Menno from Circle B. Menno's been around in this longer than I have. I learned a lot from Menno when I first started. I used to go over to Amsterdam and I'd sit with him and he'd teach me everything he knew. And many a time I kept saying, I need to get into Menno's business because this is going to fly. But then I had all my other commitments, so I kept holding back. But he's done really well, and it's growing considerably from just a few years ago. Now, what I'd like to ask is one thing, because when Menno told me this, I found it comical. Why the name Circle B, Menno? Why Circle B?
Well, so there are several explanations, but it's first of all, we wanted to do something with new hardware, with new stuff. So we want to be revolutionary and we want to be innovative. And we found that OCP is very innovative. So the logo is just a very simple thing that everybody can recognize. So we have our own brand, but we don't have our own product. So we don't sell, a bottle of cola like that. We can say our name Coca-Cola. That's the product. We don't have a product, but we want to be recognizable. For a certain with a certain logo, so that was the Circle B, and then it also reflects on that we don't do copyright. So the Circle C is the copyright logo, and that's something that we don't do. So that was a nice match with something that is recognizable. And we've been doing since the start of Circle B. It started with OCP, and we're still there because we still believe that it's the most innovative, the most energy efficient. It's also sustainable. That's been added. So we still believe in those core values of the OCP Foundation.
Thank you, Menno. Thank you. Well, at least, hopefully, everybody has learned one thing today, and that's about the copyright Circle C, Circle B, which I hope everybody's gone away knowing one new thing, and hopefully that was a new thing for most people. Right, Menno, you do these lovely little 3-minute explainer videos on YouTube, and you've had huge success, like 20,000 views on some of your explainer videos, just to show what's going on. I'd recommend everybody who's listening just to go on to the Circle B YouTube channel, and if you want to see Menno pulling this gear apart and explaining it, then it's really interesting, radically different to the traditional equipment. But something that Menno always talks about, he talks about vanity-free servers, vanity-free equipment. Can you kind of explain what you mean by that, Menno?
Well, one of the things that we mean by vanity-free is obviously that we don't do vendor lock. So you can use any type of component that you want to use, at least, of course, if it's compatible, but we don't specify that we need a certain brand of hard drive or a certain brand of memory. Of course, we have a tested list of what we know that works and that works well from the manufacturer, but there is no vendor lock-in. So that's and there's no real requirement that you need to buy components from this vendor or from us.
Okay. You also mentioned, when you use the term vanity-free on your YouTube videos, about just taking the dross out, chucking bezels away, and kind of taking stuff out that's never used. Can you explain that a little bit? Not too technical, because you'll lose people.
Okay, so normally on the front side of the server, you'll have this beautiful logo that the manufacturer put on it when they had the actual manufacturer design the server. So the server is always designed somewhere in Asia, and the marketing company puts their logo on it, which is a piece of plastic, and that's just obstructing airflow, and it doesn't add anything. So that those type of things you will not find in any of the OCP designs that we promote, just because it's not needed. So it will always be in a hyperscaler's data center where there's no lights and there's no people, so nobody needs this. And those, so everything that's kind of also what you mentioned as dematerialized, the things that are not needed, that are just visual or optical, those things are removed from OCP designs that we promote. So we try to bring those same benefits that the hyperscale companies have. We try to bring those to smaller companies within the European region.
Okay. Yes. And if anybody wants to know more detail, Menno can give you lots of detail about graphics cards missing from the servers because you never use them, all sorts of things. But another question for Menno is about the examples about the speed and ease of use of OCP hardware, and if you can touch on the tallest design, Menno, and just give some comparisons between how many servers could be looked after OCP servers by one technician compared to traditional, some figures on that, how efficient they are in terms of people and working on that hardware.
Yeah, so Facebook stated that they have one technician taking care of 25,000 servers, whereas normally you would have one technician on 1,000 servers. The reason for that is that the design is so drastically different compared to a standard 19-inch rack. So we promote, you touched on the OCP Open Rack, the version 3 that's being worked on right now by these large hyperscalers, and that's a shared work between Facebook, Microsoft, and Google, if I'm not mistaken. Right now, we are using the Open Rack V2, which is the rack used by Facebook. And that rack has all the power infrastructure and the cooling at the back of the rack. And this is all plug-in, so it's the server plugs into a bus bar, so there's no cables hanging loose. And the rest of all the connections, the hard drive base, the network connection, that's all at the front of the rack. So you have one side where you do your maintenance. If you take a server out of the rack, you don't need to go from the hot ale to the cold ale to the back, or the other way around. You just stay in the cold ale. And that's where you do all your maintenance. So that's where you plug in your debug card. If needed, you pull a spring and plunger and you take the server out of the rack. And then even changing components, like it's something that you often need to do is memory, for example. So like 1% of memory will definitely fail at some point. That's just a given from these large hyperscale companies. They know that so certain percentage of components fail. If you want to change a memory module, I think there are presentations on this. I think it's like 90 seconds to replace a memory module, and you can do all those things without using any tools. So you pull the spring and plunger, you pull out the network cable, you pull out the server, you take off the heat conductor, how do you call it? And then you have access to the memory. So even up to the network card, that takes you, I think, about 120 seconds, because that's the component that's like the most behind other components. So that takes a bit longer, and like the replacing the CMOS battery, that's a really quick thing because you just pull out the server and it's right there. So those common tasks are very easy to do, and if you don't have to go from cold corridor to the hot corridor and back, that's already saving you a lot of time.
Okay.
The tool thing.
One thing Menno said, and this is what's interesting about these collaborative open source communities, they make things better very, very fast. And Menno mentioned a ratio of 1 server technician to 25,000 physical server nodes. Now, I saw a presentation by the data center manager for Europe for Facebook. He's an Irish guy. And he showed this slide, and they are now at 1 technician for 48,000 physical server nodes. So you get this improvement ramping all the time. It's quite something. Now, I was going to ask Menno a few more questions, but I would like to now just jump into some of the questions that have come through on the chat. Now, you guys can see the questions as well. Anybody want to take one of those questions and read it out and take it on? I was thinking of perhaps one for Marc. You got a question there, Marc, that you would like to take?
I just see an email that you got all the questions, so you have to ask them to me.
Right, well, I'm not quite sure which one to ask you, because it's interesting. I raised that about the European Union and the new carbon taxes. I'm getting loads of questions on that, which is quite an interesting one. Let's have a look.
So, John, maybe I just see a question popping up, and I think it's a very valid question, whether OCP is also possible for small deployments, which was one of the most heard questions for me. So if you don't mind, I can answer that one quickly.
Okay, that would be good. And if you can also get Menno in on this, because Menno will be able to add to that about small deployments, about the small deployments in the telephone exchanges. So you take that one on.
Absolutely. So I think one of the myths that this is only applicable to hyperscalers is absolutely not the case. We see now, and we expect even more, a massive shift, because it's a proven concept, so you don't have to worry that it's not delivering what you require. And we have proven, and we, meaning Rittal, Circle B, and maincubes, with live customers, and you can find more information on Circle B's website as well as ours. We have live European customers in the MarTech industry that have chosen this technology. So rather than just the Experience Center, we have live infrastructure running on OCP as we speak. And basically, and Menno can add on that, it's available for any customer starting from 1 single rack. Menno, over to you.
So what we've done with maincubes, with our partnership, first of all, we started about 2 years ago building the OCP Experience Center. I would like to say this is a place where people can physically touch and feel OCP equipment, but also we offer remote access for those that want to try their existing operating system or their existing management tools in combination with an OCP server. So it's not everything there is running right now. It's just that we're not having any visitors physically, but we still have visitors through the internet. So this room within maincubes, we just made it a demo center. But we also have another room, a larger room, which we made into a co-location facility. And that room we have updated. But actually what we've done is we've taken a lot of stuff out. So you see the Experience Center here, and in the in the real production room, we've taken out this, let's see, where it is, this lowered ceiling, and just made power and fiber come from the top, and removed all the cables from under the floor, because we don't need any underfloor access. So we've made it a lot simpler. And in that room that we have refurbished, there we have available from one rack, single rack, we have available both the renewed equipment, which is about 3-4 years old, which comes from Facebook's data center in Sweden. So we have that available from 18 servers in a rack. And we have available new equipment. So depending on how much compute power you need, we can start with one rack with around 20 servers, and then of course until maincubes is full.
Yeah, and I think this, just to add on what Menno is saying, is so we as I mentioned previously, we transferred a legacy data center into an OCP ready data center with all the benefits. And as John was saying as well, and this is something that not a lot of people do realize, but turning an existing data center into an OCP data center has a huge benefit on the carbon footprint, because, and we can dive into the detail hopefully with all of you interested offline, but building a new data center obviously brings a lot of challenges as well, and reusing an existing one with either circular equipment, as Menno was saying, or new equipment, so much more efficient, I think is the easiest step forward for all of us. Starting from a rack up to complete private suites.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now we haven't got much time left. There's quite a few questions here. Quite a few of them are asking about the regulations in Europe. I won't go into those because they can be a bit protracted. If you kind of go on YouTube, you'll hear me talking lots of videos about these regulations. Now, after this, please contact us if you've got any specific questions. But let me pick up on another question that's in here that relates to what Marc was talking about earlier, the new V3 rack. Now, someone's asked a question. What is the status of maintenance by robots? Now, a good question. And the V3 rack that Rittal are developing at the moment with the hyperscalers is being designed in such a way that it enables robotic maintenance. And you might not realize this yet, but there's a new project started within Facebook. They've got a new division now, and it's all about robotic maintenance on data centers. So go and kind of Google that. It's all very new. It's only a few weeks old. I think it only started in December, sometime like that. But it's a really interesting thing. And the V3 rack, why it's so radical is when you push the equipment in, you pick up the water if the server needs it on a liquid manifold. You pick up the DC 48-volt bus bar, but also on the back is all the network connections. So on the front of the rack, there are absolutely no cables. And they're doing this in order to make the racks robotically maintainable. And just over a year ago, I was at a Robotics Excellence Center in Denmark, a place called Odense, where you've got the big Facebook data center, and they actually designed a robot for maintenance of OCP racks, and it took them about 6 hours because I was in the workshop. I was staggered, and they estimate that the robot will cost less than 20,000 euros to produce and sell. So there's a lot happening on that, but you really have to change the way you do things in the rack, and that's the revolution of the V3 rack. So it's a really big thing. Now we're coming to countdown time now. We've only got a few seconds left. I would just like to thank everybody that's come in, all the attendees on Kickstart that come in, listen to this, and I just hope that everybody learned one new thing, And if you can just put that one new thing in the chat, then we can see later that one new thing that you learnt, and why was it interesting to you. So in this next few seconds, if you can just pump that into the chat, would be really good. And I would also like to thank Marc, Joris, and Menno. And I think we ought to do a few more of these again. And I'm really had my fingers crossed all the way through this, because my internet went down last night while I was doing another call in America, and I thought it's going to crash today. So I said to Joris, if I go offline, Joris, you're going to be asking the questions. So thanks for everybody being involved, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you very much, John.
Cheers.